Alrighty. Welcome back to it, everyone. As always, we're going to start off with the ethics discussion, and then we'll carry over. As you can see, I've got a whole lot of extra chats open today. I was doing a bunch of testing with getting information from one chat moved over to another one in the fewest words possible. We've got some interesting developments there. But first, we're going to start with just a discussion of the ethics of AI assistants and school. There was a very popular post that was shared in a couple of different places on Reddit over the last 2 days about a master's student, and I don't actually know if the post was true or not. But regardless, it brings up a good question of a master's student writing a 4,000 word paper primarily with ChatGPT and then being caught and basically kicked out of school for plagiarism because of using an AI assistant to write most of their paper. A lot of sentiment there about people believing that's cheating, that this individual deserved to have gotten kicked out, that if you can't write your own paper, then what are you even doing in a master's level degree plan? Just generally, the sentiment seemed to be that you cheated, you deserved it, you should have just written the paper yourself. And I understand that sentiment in that there is some potential to use the AI assistant as a crutch so much that you couldn't possibly learn anything. And so at some point, all you're doing is typing in prompts, getting out data, copy pasting into paper format, and then turning that in. And so what are you really learning? But also, you have to believe that if somebody dedicated the time to seek a master's degree in a topic, that they must at least have some desire to learn something. And they must have some knowledge that is going to assist them in using the assistant to write that paper. And so, is it wrong of them to have gotten help in the effort of writing? For example, would it be wrong to dictate to another person and have them type it and then maybe give it to somebody else to edit and then turn that paper in? The information is all your own, but you didn't type it and you didn't edit it. And if you're a bad writer, but you're not in school for writing, for example, maybe you're getting a degree in microbiology, does it really matter if you have the technical writing skills? If you have the information skills? And the other thing there is that this is a technology that can't be uncreated, right? AI assistants are out there, and this is very much the same argument I had when discussing using AI assistants for professional endeavors. Um, they exist. We we are never going to live in a society where AI assistants aren't a thing. In fact, this is the worst that AI assistants are ever going to be ever again. From now on, they will get better, they will get more knowledgeable, they will get more factually accurate, they will get more user friendly, they will get more creative. From now on, that's happening. Period. You can't stop it. And I don't want to say you just need to give in to the inevitability of it, because absolutely that train of thought leads to ultimately a lot of just bad, evil things in the world, right? Because holding back wrong is something that requires consistent effort. And so using the idea of, oh well, it's inevitable, it's going to happen, so you might as well just get on board, is absolutely stupid. But it is going to happen. And so it's not a question of is it going to be used, but a question of where do we draw the line in its use? How can we make its use more ethical? How can we use it in a positive way? Because it's going to be changing educational metrics, right? Whether educational institutions allow for the use of AI assistants or not, students are going to use them. Students are going to use them and not get caught. And because of that, the average writing capability of students across the board is going to increase. Because ChatGPT absolutely writes papers that are above the average. And so with that average raising, it's going to start changing what grades look like. Because whether we do it intentionally or not, grades happen on a curve. And we decide what is an A, B, C, D, and F based on relativity to other work. And so we're going to start decreasing what it takes to fail. And so how are we hurting students who are not using the assistant inadvertently because we're not catching everyone who is using the assistant? And is that worth it when we could be using the assistant as a tool for education? And I don't believe so. I think absolutely AI assistants like ChatGPT should be allowed to help students with their schoolwork. And the more important thing is to teach them how to use it ethically and how to get the most value out of it. Because the way to get the most value out of an AI assistant is to have knowledge yourself, is to be able to converse with the assistant in a knowledgeable way so that you can direct it more specifically to what you're trying to produce. And so teaching students about how that works and the ways in which you can manipulate the assistant's outputs and the requirements of knowledge that you have to have in order to do that are much more valuable than simply outright banning the use of AI assistants as some form of plagiarism and saying, no, you can't do it, no, they're not allowed, banning them off of school networks, all of that stuff, because it doesn't matter. They're going to get used. Just like people pay other people to write their papers for them, just like there is a market for people to pay people to go take their SATs for them, just like there is a market for all of these other things. Saying it's not allowed doesn't stop it from happening. It just gives you a recourse for punishment when you catch it. But even then, you're only catching a small percentage of individuals. And so you're having a significantly lower impact than you believe you are when you ban the use of tools like this. You could ultimately have a greater impact on the ethics of those tools' use by giving students the training required to ethically and effectively use the assistant, instead of just saying, no, you can't do it, and then they just go out there and they figure out how to do it on their own with no guidance. And sure, some students are going to come up with great ways to ethically use the system, but some students are just going to recognize it as a way to coast through on some C to B average grades, and they're going to find a couple of tips and tricks to help them not get caught, and then you're going to come out with tools to catch those tricks, and then they're going to come up with a couple more tricks to not get caught, and then you're going to come out with tools to catch those tricks, and you're going to catch some students, and the rest of them are just going to coast through when they could have been learning something. And that's just a huge disservice, I think, to academia all the way around. And so I think we need to lean into it. I think it's important that we teach ethics and skills because it is a tool. And the better you know how to use a tool, the more effective you're going to be. I mean, that's just the way it is. So I think that's enough of that discussion. Obviously, if anybody wants to bring something up or has an opinion, drop it in the chat or in a comment after this video is posted up, and I will happily continue the conversation. But now we're going to talk a little bit about skills, particularly as they pertain to world building. But this is definitely something that's going to be effective, I think, in programming. It's something that's going to be effective in anything, any creative endeavor with the AI that is going to exceed its typical memory and cause it to start forgetting things. Because one of the most important things when you're doing a project as big as world building or writing something really long or making a program that's exceptionally long, and you need to maintain context throughout a relatively long program. If you were writing a story or a series of stories or blogs or something like that, all of that stuff would just need some way to use multiple different chats and carry information over and create a dense form of the information that you're building with the AI so that you can cram as much of it in there as possible before you start getting the AI to generate some things. So that's a lot of what we're going to talk about today. And the trick that I've learned and what I'm going to start using is actually something we talked a little bit about yesterday, but I really started to understand in some of my testing today. And it's about getting the AI to name things. Because there is a huge amount of subcontext in the way the AI looks at proper nouns. So one of the examples I have here is this is sort of my character generation text, and I developed this text over the course of a little bit of this experimenting. but this is what I'm going to start using when I start to look at building random characters for my world. And some of the information that I want, a lot of it has been added in there for my own benefit, so I know what the AI is considering when they create a character. Because I honestly no longer believe that you need anything more than a name for the AI to have an understanding of a character. And that can be a name generated by the AI or by you. So all of this other information is just information to help me understand who that character is, so that as I interact with the AI in the future, me and it are on the same page. But this information here is a solution, right? Based on the context, there is basically no context here except that I've given it a name and a race, which is half elf. But it actually created the race itself in a previous example here, and I just carried it over to this one. But once you I'm explaining this poorly. The AI has a default set of context, right? The data that it was provided when it began training or during its training is what created its context for its understanding of certain concepts, like fantasy races, like half-elf. It's what generated its understanding of all of the information that I'm asking it for here. It's what generated its understanding of what a character is, and what makes a character. And there's information that it has developed for who this character is that it is not printed here because I didn't ask it. Because I don't know all of the categories that it fills out when it creates a character. But this right here is a solution. Just like the solution to a math problem when working with a computational program, the AI has solved this question right here. And it has provided me with its solution. And so if I ask it in a totally different chat to create a character named Kata, who is a half-elf, it will give me the same solution. Because this is half-elf plus Kata equals this information right here as far as the AI is concerned. It's not going to give it to me word for word exact, because there is an element of randomness introduced intentionally by the AI's programming, and so it's going to flavor some of the information in this solution a little differently. But ultimately, the character is the same. A little bit of the wording is different, and we see that. Let's find. I believe this is the first iteration of Kata here. Nope. Okay. I'm just going to cycle through some of these and see if I can't get to where I find the first iteration of Kata. Oh, okay. So this is the first one. So just create a character using this format, and this is what it gave me. It gave me Kata the half-elf, whose age is 25, whose alignment is chaotic good, whose occupation is adventurer, and whose organizational affiliation is none. Kata's personality. Kata is a free-spirited and impulsive individual, often acting on her gut instincts. Her half-elf heritage has led her to feel like an outcast in both human and elven society. Why does it keep doing this? Giving her a strong sense of individuality and self-reliance. She values freedom above all else and will not let anyone or anything stand in the way of her pursuit of it. Despite her chaotic nature, she has a strong sense of morality and will always fight for what is right. Kata is also fiercely independent but cares deeply for her friends and will do anything to protect them. Physical appearance. Kata is tall and lean with long, dark hair and piercing green eyes. Her half-elf heritage is evident in her pointed ears and slightly elongated facial features. She is heavily scarred from her time as an adventurer, with a large scar running down the left side of her face. She wears leather armor adorned with various trinkets and trophies from her adventures and carries a variety of weapons, including a long sword and a short bow. Major accomplishment. Kata is known for her role in defeating an infamous dragon terrorizing a nearby village, and for successfully navigating the treacherous and uncharted Darkwood Forest. She also played a key role in uncovering a conspiracy to overthrow the local ruler, and was instrumental in restoring peace to the kingdom. Awesome. That's the half-elf adventurer Kata. Now, without any additional context, other than just the fact that we're going to give it the half-elf, and that we're going to name it Kata, everything else about this prompt was the same. We just copy pasted it. When we get our new half-elf Kata, she's a half-elf, the age is unknown, the alignment is neutral good instead of chaotic. She's still an occupation adventurer, and her affiliations are none. Personality. Kata is a curious and adventurous individual, always eager to explore new places and discover new things. She values freedom and individuality, and believes in using her skills and abilities to help those in need. Despite her outgoing nature, Kata has a deep sense of empathy and compassion, and is always willing to lend a helping hand to those in need. Her unique voice is confident and determined, with a hint of playfulness and mischief. Kata's main goal is to experience as much of the world as possible and make a positive impact on the lives of those around her. She is driven by a desire to see and learn new things, but also by a sense of duty to protect the innocent and defend the weak. Physical appearance. Kata is tall and slender with long dark hair and piercing green eyes. She has pointed ears and a slightly angular jawline, marking her as of half-elf heritage. She has an athletic build, as well as a scar on the left cheek, which she got in a fight with a bandit. She wears practical but comfortable clothing, usually a green tunic and brown pants, as well as a leather chestplate. She also carries a long sword at her side and a quiver of arrows on her back, which she uses with deadly accuracy. Major accomplishments. Kata has traveled to many different lands and has completed many dangerous quests, such as defeating a dragon terrorizing a village, rescuing a kidnapped prince, and uncovering a bandit's stronghold. She's also known for her ability to track down lost artifacts and treasures, and has helped many scholars and researchers in their quest for knowledge. Okay, so as you see, two totally separate chats, the same context given, the same output given. Now, again, it's not identical. But it is close enough that just by bringing this little bit of information over, and honestly, you don't even need this, right? Because this is just the information I'm giving it to tell me what to write, or to tell the game or the AI what to write here. Right? This is just information I personally want to know about the character, but that information is generated sort of regardless of what I put down here, right? Because if I ask the AI to write me a story about Kata the half-elf, it's going to use this information about who Kata the half-elf is to provide me with that story, right? It still has to generate that character to give me that story. And so this context here, this description, all of this information about Kata travels pretty much entirely based on her name and race. And that's insane. it is crazy how much data the AI associates to proper nouns. And it's not just names of characters. It's names of places. It's names of all kinds of stuff. And we saw that a little bit yesterday when we asked for some names of some kingdoms. And Caladria, which was the name that we chose for our seaside kingdom with a strong navy, we chose it because we wanted a seaside kingdom. And when we asked the AI for some names, it told us this is a name that a kingdom could have in a fantasy world, and this is what that name sort of implies as far as I'm concerned. And then if you told it later to tell you about a kingdom with that name, then it was going to tell you basically the same information. Now, I want to show you guys how you could mess this up. Because it is important that any context, right? We're using the default context of the artificial intelligence right now. So because we haven't given it any additional information other than a name and a race, right? We haven't had a conversation with it about our world yet. So there isn't any context beyond the default context that the AI understands. And so it's giving us this information. But we can absolutely ruin the half-elf adventurer Kada. It's going to take me a minute to try and find this chat because this website hates me. But the only additional context I gave it in this next example is that half-elves are pacifists. And so if a half-elf is a pacifist, then everything about Kada sort of has to change. Because Kata's an adventurer. She carries weapons. She runs about doing adventuring things. And so if you told discrimination offense. Okay, so this is where I did it. First, I wanted to do a fantasy world where half-elves were not permitted to be adventurers, but that triggered the censorship of the AI. It said, I'm sorry, but creating a fantasy world where certain groups of people are discriminated against or not allowed to participate in certain activities goes against the values of inclusivity and equality. It is not appropriate to create such a world. Let's focus on creating a fantasy world that promotes positive values and inclusivity for all its inhabitants. I actually really like this. And I do feel like you're right, this could have been worded differently, and so I did word it differently. Let's create a fantasy world where half-elves are pacifists and do not carry or practice with weapons. Sure, we can create a fantasy world where half-elves are pacifists and do not carry or practice with weapons. In this world, half-elves may have a strong belief in nonviolence and may instead focus on developing other skills such as diplomacy, magic, or healing. They may also have a deep connection to nature and the natural world. This could add an interesting cultural dynamic to the fantasy world and create unique role-playing opportunities for half-elf characters. Then I tell it to create a character named Kada with the following format. A half-elf character named Kada with the following format. And then I gave it the exact same creation prompt because this is the exact same information I want to get from it. And then we got Kada, who is a half-elf, who is age 25, which is the same as the original. Alignment is lawful good. Occupation is now herbalist and healer. And the organizational affiliations it just created is a member of a local pacifist community. So it is including that context that we generated for it. Now we have a totally different personality. Kada is a gentle and kind-hearted individual who deeply values peace and nonviolence. Growing up as a half-elf in a world where they were often mistrusted and discriminated against, she learned to rely on her own inner strength and compassion. This has led her to become a skilled herbalist and leader, dedicating her life to helping others and spreading a message of kindness and understanding. She is fiercely determined to make a difference in the world, but also has a tendency to be too trusting of others. Her core trait is her kindness. Physical appearance. Kata has long curly auburn hair and piercing green eyes that hint at her elven heritage. She is of average height and has a lean and athletic build. Her skin is sun-kissed from spending so much time outdoors gathering herbs and plants. She wears simple earthy-toned clothing and carries a satchel filled with her herbal remedies and healing tools. She has a serene and peaceful demeanor, often seen with a small smile on her face. Major accomplishments. Kata has saved many lives with her healing abilities, and she has been able to bring peace to many conflicts between different groups through her diplomatic skills. Speech style. Kata speaks in a soft and soothing tone, often using metaphors and imagery to make her point. She is a good listener and tends to use reflective listening to understand other people's point of view. She is also known to use proverbs and sayings from her pacifist community to emphasize her point. So we have now gotten an entirely different character. The hair color changed. The eyes are still green, which is interesting to me. But she's, now we have this sun-kissed skin. Her entire personality has sort of changed, right? She's no longer about exploring the world and seeing new things. She's now all about compassion and peace and helping people. And even though some of that is sort of carried over from the original Kata, this extremely small amount of additional context that half-elves are pacifists has completely changed this character, which is how you could potentially really mess up your world building with the AI, is if you don't generate your context in the right orders, then you may generate context that alters the way the AI perceives something that you've already built. So a lot of times in world building, something people try to do is they start small. They create a main character, and then they create maybe the town they grew up in, and then they create, the area around that town, and they expand out from the smallest point. But the smallest point, the individual characters draw the most context from the rest of the world. And so if you're going to use an AI for world building, then you're going to need to start with the broadest context you can, and then shrink it down to your characters so that once you get to that point and you start generating characters like this, that additional context is all already there. And so adding context isn't going to change the AI's understanding of who a character is, and ultimately cause your previous world building efforts to sort of be for nothing. So basically everything that I started doing yesterday was for absolutely nothing, and we're pretty much going to delete all of the world building we did as it pertains to the goblin race, because that was too narrow a scope and we hadn't done enough to build the core world yet, right? We've got our magic system kind of built out, and that's an important part of the world tier world building. We also need to think about like our deities and how those deities interact with the world. Maybe not creating the deities specifically, but maybe how religion in general is handled in our world. We need to think about what the races are, and we need to think about the macro scale of how those races interact, and then start building out individual races, and then start building out individual kingdoms, and then start building out individual points of interest like towns and stuff like that, and then start building out individual characters. So we've got a whole lot of macro work to do before we can get down to characters and such. And then the other thing that I noticed while I was doing some of this testing and while I was failing miserably at world building yesterday was that it's unnecessary to describe things to the AI. So we were building the goblin race, and we were coming up with ideas for what describes a goblin. But like we talked about earlier, the AI already has a default context for what makes a goblin. And so you don't need to go through, for example, these personality things. You don't need to go through and consider what core traits are potentially available to goblins because the AI already has a default idea of the traits that could be goblin traits. All you need to do is explicitly tell the AI the things that you want to be different than its default understanding. So, for example, most fantasy literature and games and culture depicts goblins as green. In my world, I want goblins to be a mixture of colors that are all earth tones, right? So oranges and greens and browns and all kinds of stuff like that. So I need to give the AI an explicit description that says not all goblins are green, they come in all earth tone colors. But that's the only information I need to give it, and it'll still have all this other context for personality and appearance and what they might think of as an accomplishment and the way that they speak and all of that stuff is already in there. Another thing is I don't want goblins to necessarily be an evil race in my world. So I will explicitly tell it that goblins are just like any race. Primarily, they're law-abiding, good, and then we might have some bad goblins. Obviously there are evil goblins, there are thieving goblins, there are whatever. But the only context I need to tell it is that in my world, goblins aren't necessarily an evil race or a bad race. And then it'll just carry that context over. So there's a very small amount of context that I need to be providing about that race because I can lean on that default understanding that the AI already has. So the best way to do that is to simply get in an empty chat and start asking the AI questions about what it thinks of these certain things, right? So tell me about goblins, tell me about dwarves, tell me about orcs, tell me about giants. Let me know what your default understanding is, and then I can go through and say, okay, I don't like this, okay, I do like this, and then I can explicitly write a prompt that's extremely condensed, extremely small, that just talks about the way I want to change your default understanding. And then in just a couple of sentences, we can have wildly different races than you would normally find in a fantasy world. But we haven't had to take up all of this extra space with these long, drawn-out explanations of what we think these characters are. So we're going to do some of that today. And then one of the last things that I worked with a little bit is generating new races. So I just straight up asked it, I said, let's create a brand new fantasy race. We will start with a name. Do you have any ideas? And then it said, sure, how about the Aloria? And I said, cool, tell me about the Aloria. The Aloria are a race of winged humanoids who live in the mountains. They are known for their powerful aerial abilities and their skill in metalworking. They are a proud and noble people with a strong sense of community and a deep connection to the natural world. They are led by a council of elders who make decisions for the tribe based on the guidance of their spiritual leaders. They are peaceful and isolationist, but fiercely protective of their homeland and their way of life. And then I said, cool, tell me more about them. The Eloria are a race of winged humanoids. They have beautiful feathered wings that allow them to fly. They are known for their powerful aerial abilities and their skill in metalworking. They are proud of their metal crafts. They are able to create strong and lightweight armor, weapons, and jewelry, and are highly valued by other races. They live in small communities in the mountains. Their homes are built into the rocks, making them almost invisible to the ground. They have a deep reverence for nature and the natural world. They believe that all living things are connected and that it is their duty to protect and care for the environment. They have a strong sense of community and they rely on each other for survival in their harsh mountain home. They are led by a council of elders who make decisions for the tribe based on the guidance of their spiritual leaders, who are highly respected and have a deep understanding of the natural world. Despite their peaceful and isolationist nature, they are fiercely protective of their homeland and their way of life. They will defend their territory against any perceived threats, and they are not afraid to use their aerial abilities to do so. They are not known to have any enemies, but they are cautious of strangers entering their territory. Overall, the Eloria are a proud and noble people, deeply connected to the natural world and fiercely protective of their homeland and their way of life. So then, um, I decided that I wanted to see how the context would change and how the description would change if instead of feathery wings, we had leathery wings. So if the Eloria had leathery wings instead of feathered wings, I would suggest renaming them the Draconia. This name evokes the image of dragons, which often have leathery wings in fantasy settings. It also maintains the connection to the idea of nobility and strength. So then I said, tell me more about the Draconia race. The Draconia are a race of winged humanoids with leathery wings that allow them to fly. They are known for their powerful aerial abilities and their skill in metalworking. They are proud of their metal crafts. They are able to create strong and lightweight armor, weapons, and jewelry that are highly valued by other races. They live in small communities in the mountains. Their homes are built into rocks, making them almost invisible from the ground. They have a deep reverence for nature and the natural world. They believe that all living things are connected and that it is their duty to protect and care for the environment. They have a strong sense of community and they rely on each other for survival in their harsh mountain home. They are led by a council of elders who make decisions for the tribe based on the guidance of their spiritual leaders, who are highly respected and have a deep understanding of the natural world. Despite their peaceful and isolationist nature, they are fiercely protective of their homeland and their way of life. And then it stopped because I probably accidentally told it to stop. But you can see that it took all of this information here and added it as context because I told it to give me a new name for this race that it had already created based on this one change. And you'll see now, if we go and we create a Draconian race, or a Draconia race, without that extra context, it actually changes it significantly. It stops being humanoid. The Draconia are a race of or dragon-like creatures that inhabit a fantasy world. They possess powerful wings that allow them to fly, as well as sharp claws and teeth for hunting and defense. They are known for their intelligence and wisdom, often serving as leaders and advisors to other races. Draconia can vary in size, in size and appearance, with some being small and agile, while others are large and formidable. They can breathe fire, ice, or poison, and have a tough, scaled skin that protect them from physical damage. Draconia are typically solitary creatures living in remote areas, such as mountains or forests. They hoard treasure and are fiercely protective of their territory. However, they can also be peaceful and will help those in need, especially if they share a common goal. They are also known for their long lifespan, often living for centuries and gathering knowledge and power over time. They can be found in different colors, from classic reds and blues to greens and purples. The Draconia are revered by many other races, who see them as powerful and respected beings. They are respected for their wisdom and strength. Despite this, they are also feared for their power, and those that cross them risk facing the full wrath of a Draconia. And then I actually had it build the Draconia race twice. And here on the first one, we see the Draconia are a race of powerful dragon-like beings. They have large winged bodies with scales that are vary in color from deep red to shimmering gold. Their eyes are bright and piercing, and they possess sharp teeth and claws. You're going to see that a lot of this gets replicated, and there's a little bit of flavor change, and there's a little bit of change in who the Draconia are. For example, it doesn't explicitly say... Oh no, it does say that they are sought out as advisors and leaders by other races in this one. But the AI has a very, very specific understanding of what things are based on the names that it's given. And so the proper nouns of things is very, very important. And the additional context that you give it is very, very important. Which is why I think one of the most important things you can do in world building is get the AI to give you names for things. Because if you name it, then you have to ask it for the context. Right, you have to say, okay, I want this character to be named Bob. Now tell me about Bob. But if you just tell it to give the character a name, then, well, I guess you kind of have to ask it for the context either way. So whenever you name something, you need to get information from the AI, but that information is really only for your knowledge. Because once something is named, right, there's a whole solution that goes on in the background. And that solution will carry over as long as all of your other world building also has carried over. So you might want to save a lot more information for your own personal records, right? I've got my Notion note page that I've always got up. You guys never see it because it's on a different screen, but it's there, and I'm constantly just copying information that the AI is generating for me and putting it over there so I can review it. I condense some of it down myself, but now that I know this about naming conventions, and I understand that it has this default solution that it has for everything, and all you have to do is explain to it how you want to change that default. I think we're going to be able to get a lot of world building done in a very small number of words, which is going to leave us open to generate a lot more story before we have to condense that story down or delete part of that story and then post up maybe the last 3 or 4 pages of our story and then have it continue from there. So it's going to be able to maintain a much more coherent story over a longer period of time because so much of our world building is going to be able to get condensed down. Because again, it doesn't save everything in a chat, right? Eventually it starts to forget what happened at the beginning of the chat. So you need to be able to condense your world building as much as possible so that you can stretch out where that forgetfulness happens so you can get as much text in as possible. So we're gonna delete a bunch of these that I used for testing because I think that having a bajillion chats open is making OpenAI hate me right now. I'm gonna get rid of this Draconia race stuff. Get rid of all of this. We're gonna get rid of a bunch of the goblin stuff we did yesterday because it was all wrong. It's not at all what I'm looking for. Don't care about Kaida. Don't care about this new chat. Don't care about random character generation that I did. Don't care about Grommek. Don't care about any of this. Don't care about that. Okay, now we're just back to some of the more original stuff that we were building. I'm probably going to go back and start a new world building chat. And then I'm going to dump the magic system into that world building chat because the magic system is kind of a core part of the world. and I want that information to provide context to the rest of the world that we're creating. And then once I provide the broad context for the world, I'm probably going to get the AI to name the world so that we can carry that context over, right? Because you can also do this sort of in an inverse way, where instead of just having it name something, right, it's going to, if you provide it a bunch of information about what something is and then say, give me a name, it's going to give you a name that most closely represents the description you've given it based on its default understanding. And so it's not quite as good as getting it to just give you a name and tell you what that means. But since it would take a lot to learn about a world and then to decide if that's the world that you want, you sort of have to start the inverse way, and then you can start building out kingdoms and stuff like that in a more traditional, tell me a name, tell me about the kingdom. Okay, I like that, I'm going to keep that. Okay, now give me a new name, tell me about this kingdom. Okay, I like that, we'll keep that. And just moving forward that way. So let's start building a world again. Go over here, we've got magic system info. Actually, I wonder, here is some info about a fantasy magic system. And then we'll plop that information down, right? This is the information about the runic magic system we created. But I didn't consider straight up naming the entire system. So what name would you give this magic system? Let's say, oh, here is a magic system for a fantasy world. What name would you give this magic system? The rune magic system. Well, that was a really concise. I've never gotten such a concise answer. Okay, so now I want to see how well the system we've created matches up against its default. So tell me about a fantasy magic system, or that's not going to get me the answer I want. Let's create a fantasy magic system called the Rune Magic. The Rune Magic system. Oh, darn it. Let's create a fantasy magic system called the Rune Magic system. Tell me about this system. So let's see. The Rune Magic system is a fantasy magic system where individuals known as rune wielders have the ability to harness the power of ancient runes to cast spells and perform magical feats. These runes are inscribed on various mediums such as stone, metal, or even the skin of the rune wielder, and each rune holds a specific meaning and power. To use the runes, the wielder must first understand the meaning and power of the specific rune they wish to use. They then must channel their own magical energy or mana into the rune to activate its power. The power of the rune can be used for a wide range of abilities such as healing, protection, divination, and even destruction. Rune magic is a rare and highly respected ability in this fantasy world, with only a select few individuals able to wield it. Those who possess the ability to use rune magic are often trained in the ancient art by a master rune wielder or in a specialized school. Rune magic can also be combined with other forms of magic such as elemental magic or blood magic to create even more powerful spells and abilities. Okay, so this is pretty close to the context we had before. We want our rune magic to be much more widespread. We want it to be the only kind of magic in the world. And hmm, let's make sure we go over to our notes and say magic system name is rune magic system. What a unique name there, ChatGPT. Just really going all out with it. Okay. So now one of the things I want to do is I want to change some things, and then I want to ask it to just list things that I explicitly changed and see if we can make a more condensed list of the changes that way. So let's say this is a good description. However, I want the magic to be widespread and everyone to be able to wield it at some level. In this fantasy world, the ability to wield rune magic is widespread and not limited to a select few individuals. Instead, it is a common skill that many people have the potential to learn and master. In this society, all citizens are taught the basics of rune magic as part of their education. This allows them to perform simple tasks such as lighting a fire, opening a door, using runes. However, for those who wish to master the art of rune magic and access its full potential, they must seek out specialized training and education. These individuals may attend a school dedicated to the study of rune magic or apprentice to a master rune wielder. This approach allows for a diverse range of individuals to wield rune magic at varying levels of proficiency. Some may only be able to perform simple tasks, while others may become powerful mages capable of incredible feats. The society also recognizes and values the mastery of rune magic as a highly respected profession, and those who excel in it can become leaders, scholars, and respected members of the community. Okay, so this is fantastic because, again, it's telling us way more than we need to include, right? This is the solution. So all we have to do is tell it that rune magic is widespread. So now, let's see. Give me a list of characteristics of the magic system that I changed. Widespread and not limited to a select few individuals in the fantasy world, the ability to wield rune magic taught as a common skill. All citizens are taught the basics of rune magic as a part of their education. Specialized training and education for those who wish to master them. Okay, so it's listing all of this, not just that one. Interesting. But I definitely think this is something that's going to be useful. Maybe if I change some more things. Because I think all of this is just going to be added when we say it's widespread and not limited to select few individuals. I think it's just going to sort of add the rest of these concepts in there. So there's not going to be any reason in keeping them for specific use. So I'm just going to copy this. I'm going to go to my magic system. I'm just going to paste it right in there. Get some water real quick. I have to admit that before yesterday and before the recognition and understanding of the fact that the AI has already solved all of these questions when you ask it, and that it has this default understanding of things, I was really concerned that it was just going to be impossible to build a really developed world um, and have the AI assist you at all in writing any stories or anything like that of substance in the world, because um, I thought you were just gonna have to put too much in there and you were going to exceed its memory limit. But this understanding of naming things and all of the extra description that the AI kind of pulls out of these names is really going to help with that. I think you might even be able to get away with generating an outline for the plot and then naming specific sections of the plot, and then even using that to give context as you write a longer story so that it can keep track better of where it is inside of that plot based on those plot point names. I'm not exactly sure how that'll work, but I'm sure we can come up with something interesting to help build that out and keep it going in the right direction. Name the arcs. I don't know, something. I'm really on this naming things kick. It's very, very important. So what are some other things about our rune magic system that we need to add in here? Study, practice, apprenticeship, speak a specific phrase by combining some multiple runes. It's already sort of given this context of needing to channel magical energy or mana into the runes to activate its power. Uh, so I like this. This is very much the same as the physical strength idea that we had before. So we'll just keep that the way that is. We just want it to be more common. Also, we want rune magic to be the only kind of magic in our world. And I'm just going to add that into our notes as well. Rune magic is the only type of magic. In this fantasy world, rune magic is the only form of magic that exists. It is a unique and ancient form of magic that harnesses the power of inscribed runes to cast spells and perform magical feats. This makes rune magic highly valued and respected in this society, as it is the only means of performing magic. Those who master the art of rune magic hold a unique position of power and influence in the world. The use of runes is pervasive in the culture, with runes being inscribed on various mediums such as stone, metal, or even the skin of the rune wielder. and each rune holds a specific meaning and power. The society has a rich tradition of understanding, creating, and using runes, and people are often trained in the ancient art by a master rune wielder or in a specialized school. Additionally, this approach amplifies the magic system, making it easy for people to understand and for the storytellers to develop. Okay, so now let's try again. Let's do give a brief list of characteristics I have explicitly changed. You can do it, ChatGPT. I believe in you. Rune magic is the only form of magic in this fantasy world. Rune magic is the only form of magic that exists. Only means of performing magic. Rune magic is the only means of performing magic in this world. Unique position of power. Wow. What just happened? Okay. Stop generating. Regenerate the response. I think I broke ChatGPT. Okay, I don't like this. What bullet points about the rune magic system did I say to change? There's a lot of trial and error when trying to identify the best ways to get something out of the AI assistant. Once you understand what it is you need to say to it, then you can just replicate that over and over again. But when you're trying to do something brand new that you haven't done before, you're just going to have to beat your face into the wall a couple of times until you get it figured out. So rune magic is the only form of magic that exists. Rune magic is highly valued and respected in this society. The use of runes is pervasive in the culture, with runes being inscribed on various mediums such as stone, metal, or even skin. The society has a rich tradition of understanding, creating, and using runes. The magic system is simplified, making it easy for people to understand and for the storyteller to develop. Hmm. So it didn't say anything about it being the only form of magic in the world. It's possible that we're just going to have to keep track of what we change ourselves, which is relatively easy. You can just do it kind of a one thing at a time. Adding those notes in isn't extremely difficult. You can just open any random word processing program and just anywhere in there pound out some information real quick. It's relatively simple. It won't slow the process too much. But I think trying to get it to, because it gives you all these extra explanations and all this extra information, and it's going to want to continue using that information until you explicitly tell it not to. And I think that'll just muddy up your muddy up your world building and just make it harder for you to ultimately keep track of what you're trying to say. That's fantastic. That's super, super easy. So now we have a name for our magic system. So now when we go into our world building, right, we're going to tell it, let's build a fantasy world together. This world will have a magic system called the rune magic system with the following specific changes. Then we'll just go over here. We'll copy our specific changes. And then we'll paste our specific changes in. And then we'll say OK. And it's going to spit something out for us. It's going to tell us how awesome we are. Because, of course, ChatGPT is exceptionally complimentary. It always wants to tell you how awesome you are, and I love it. In this fantasy world, the rune magic system is the only form of magic available. It is not limited to a select group of individuals and can be learned and practiced by anyone. This allows for a wide range of possibility in terms of how magic is used and integrated into society. For example, it could be used for everyday tasks or for more specialized roles such as warfare or construction. Additionally, the way in which the rune magic system is learned and practiced could also differ from traditional fantasy settings, potentially leading to unique cultural and societal developments. All right. Let's talk about our world. Now let's talk about building our world. Where should we start? It's getting really, really slow. Obviously, we've got a lot of people on line right now. Which likely means that we're going to hit a rate limiter at some point. And it's going to tell us that we have done too many requests in an hour, or whatever the rate limiter says. All right. Oh. A good starting point for building a fantasy world would be to establish the setting, including the geographical layout and climate, as well as the cultures, societies, and political systems that exist within the world. This will give a foundation for the world and help guide decisions about how the rune magic system is integrated into the various aspects of the world. Another important aspect to consider is the history of the world, including any significant events or conflicts that have shaped. Well, that's unhappy. Okay, well, we did get a little bit of information. Geographically, right, we're making an entire planet, so we're going to have a large variety of biomes, and I don't think we're going to need to add any additional descriptions unless we come up with a specific set of environmental concepts that we want to integrate together to create a biome of our own. But most fantasy settings, you're going to have cold mountains, you're going to have rocky mountains, you're going to have snow-capped mountains, you're going to have thin forest, you're going to have thick forest, you're going to have swamps, you're going to have plains, and these things are just going to exist naturally, and there's no reason to believe that the AI doesn't already have a solution to those environmental areas. And so since I don't see any particular reason to specifically change any of them, maybe once we get down to the level where we're describing regions or describing certain points of interest, then we might decide, this swamp specifically has something special about it, or this forest specifically has something special about it. But I don't think at the macro scale we want all forests or all swamps to have those differences. Um, I am a little bit unhappy about not being able to get this put out here. The other thing is we're obviously going to want to create our races at this macro area. And that's something I think we're going to do in individual chats. And then we'll come back into the world building chat and say, okay, these are our races. This is the context for the world. And that'll be there for when we start developing, the smaller and smaller pieces of our world. We'll want the context of what races already exist and the structure of their societies. And I think that's going to be one of the biggest parts of the world building and provide most of the context for our smaller areas of world building as well, like our cities, our ruins, our caves. All of these things are going to be informed by the races that have existed on the world throughout history and how their societies were built. And so that's going to be a huge part of the world building. And then magic and technology we've already talked about. We're going to put this in a medieval setting, which is pretty standard for technology, or for the technological level of fantasy settings. And then religion and mythology, we do want to develop a religion and mythology system, at least at the macro level. We don't necessarily, I think maybe at the racial level, we'll describe specific deities and their import to the different races. And in fact, that is also probably a solution that already exists for the AI. So we'll just have to ask it when we generate our races, what deities do they worship? What areas of their lives do these deities, quote unquote, have domain over? And then again, we'll specifically add or remove deities or change the domains of deities in the way we like, and then that will be the information that we have to give it, right? Because that baseline, that default already exists. All we have to do is tell it what we're trying to change. And then it'll carry that information over with a minimum amount of text on our part. And that's, again, the most important thing is we are trying to condense our world building as much as possible while still providing as much context to the AI as we can. And then, so what we need to do right now is we need to craft a prompt, and use that prompt to get the AI to spit out a nice hefty chunk of information about whatever race we ask it about. Because we want to know as much about its default as we possibly can. So we already sort of did goblins yesterday, so let's go back to goblins. Let's use some of the things we decided yesterday as part of this information. So let's talk about the goblins of a... Actually, I want to go back to Let's build a fantasy world. Okay, excellent. Blah, 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 blah. So we want to go back to this. We want to edit this. And we want to say, let's talk about the goblins in our fantasy world. We want physical characteristics. We want personality traits. We want religious beliefs. Oh, um, we want societal structure. Oh, and we want brief history. And let's see what its default for these areas is. In this fantasy world, goblins are small, scrappy creatures with pointed ears and sharp teeth. They have a greasy, matted fur that is typically a dark green or brown color. They have a hunched posture and long, thin fingers. They are quick and nimble, making them skilled climbers and tunnelers. Personality-wise, goblins are known for being cunning and resourceful. They are also known for being greedy and selfish. They are not above stealing or tricking others to get what they want. They are also not particularly brave and will typically run away from a fight if they think they will lose. Goblins are not specified. Religious beliefs of goblins are not specified as per your request. Interesting. Societal structure of goblins is typically led by a powerful chief or king who maintains control through a combination of strength and guile. Underneath the chief are a variety of lesser leaders and elites who control different aspects of goblin society, such as trade or military. The history of goblins in this fantasy world is not specified as per your request. Okay. So this is what it thinks a goblin is. So let's talk about the things we want to change. In our fantasy world, goblins have goblins come in all different earth tone colors and have long ears, hands, and feet. Personality-wise, goblins are known for being greedy and selfish. They are not above stealing and tricking others to get what they want. They are also not particularly brave and will typically run away from a fight if they think they will lose. Yesterday I said that I wanted to reimagine goblins in a more normal way, almost like halflings instead of goblins. But I don't know if I want to do that with their personality per se. I think instead we we will integrate them more into the societies of other races, but okay. And in In our fantasy world, goblins not only live in all goblin societies, but many live among the other races in their cities or in their communities. Okay, so those would be the two big things we change about goblins. Okay, so in this fantasy world, goblins come in a variety of earth tone colors such as green, brown, and gray. They have distinct physical characteristics with long ears, hands, and feet, which gives them an even more unique appearance compared to typical goblins. In addition to living in goblin-only societies, goblins in this fantasy world also integrate themselves into communities of other races. This leads to a diverse range of goblin subcultures and communities, each with their own unique customs and traditions. This also allows for a wider range of interactions and relationships between goblins and the other races in the fantasy world, potentially leading to unique conflicts, alliances, and cultural exchange. So I like this. We are going to keep, in addition to living in goblin-only societies, goblins in this fantasy world also integrate themselves into communities of other races. So we're going to copy just that line. The rest of this is just kind of flavor about what that means. And we're going to go over to our goblins. And we're going to paste that in there. And in this fantasy world, goblins come in a variety of earth tone colors. We just want that. We don't want to keep the info about the examples, because once you start giving it examples, it locks in really hard, and then it would just be green, brown, and gray all the time. There would never be any oranges or anything like that. It would just be green, brown, and gray. And other than that, we don't have to worry about any of the rest of this, because all of this is default, and we only have to tell it about the things we want to change. Okay, so now let's edit this. We're going to fork this here, and instead of talking about goblins, let's talk about orcs. So in this fantasy world, orcs are a race of humanoids known for their brute strength and fierce nature. They typically have green or gray skin, sharp teeth, and pointed ears. They are often taller and broader than humans and have a more muscular build. Orcs are known to be fierce warriors and formidable fighters. They value strength and courage above all else, and have a strong sense of loyalty to their tribe or clan. They can be quick to anger and are not easily intimidated. Orcs have a strong spiritual connection to the natural world and often worship a variety of nature gods. They believe that the spirits of the land animals and even the elements can be called upon to aid them in battle. Orc society is typically organized into small, tight-knit tribes or clans. These groups are led by a powerful chieftain who is chosen based on their strength and fighting prowess. Orcs value loyalty and honor above all else and will fiercely defend their tribe or clan against any perceived threats. Orcs have a rich history in this fantasy world with many ancient legends and stories passed down through their generations. They have been involved in many conflicts and wars with other races, but have also been known to form alliances when it suits their needs. They are a proud and independent people, valuing their freedom above all else. Something I just noticed is in this fantasy world, we actually don't just want goblins to live among other societies. We want all the races to intermingle, at least some, right? I would like to see a separation where the majority of individuals of each race live amongst individuals of their own races, but I would like to see a greater mingling, probably mostly in human cities where the races congregate, because that tends to be a trope of fantasy worlds where humans tend to be the most willing to live alongside other races, even if they don't necessarily like those races. Um, so we're probably going to do something like that. But other than that, I like all of this information about the orcs. I don't see a need to change much about them. I sort of like the default. It's actually why I picked orcs as one of the races I wanted to have in this fantasy setting, because I think their default can be a lot of fun. And I don't at this time just have any interesting things I want to say about them. So I'll probably just leave them as they are. Maybe I'll come back. This is going to be kind of my race building chat, and I actually wish that I could change its name because I don't like what it's named, but oh well. So now we're going to edit this again, and let's talk about giants. In our fantasy world, the giants are a race of beings known for their immense size and strength. They have thick, rough skin that ranges in color from deep brown to dark gray, and their eyes are often a bright, piercing blue. They have long, shaggy hair that is typically black or dark brown, and they possess large, powerful jaws and sharp teeth. Personality-wise, giants are generally seen as stoic, reserved, and a bit slow to anger, but when they are angered, they can be a force to be reckoned with. They are also known to be fiercely loyal to their families and friends. Religious beliefs of giants are tied to nature and ancestor worship. They believe that the natural world and their ancestors hold the key to wisdom and guidance. They hold a deep respect for the earth and its natural resources, and they often make offerings to their ancestors in the form of food and other gifts. Societal structure of giants is based on a clan structure, with each clan led by a chief or chieftain. These leaders are chosen based on their strength, wisdom, and leadership skills. Giants live in large extended families and value the bonds of family and community above all else. In terms of history, giants have always existed in the world and have lived in harmony with nature for thousands of years. However, in recent history, the giants have come into conflict with other races of the fantasy world as they expand and encroach on their territories. The giants have been forced to defend their homes and way of life, leading to a strained relationship with the other races. Okay, again, I do want to see some integration of the giants, but because we're going to be integrating all the races, I don't need to make it explicit here. Um, Giants generally being stoic is fine. When we create characters, we're probably going to want to break out of some of the defaults because default characters just aren't that interesting. But that'll be something that we'll use our character generation prompts to do. And then we'll just have to make sure that those changes are defined in those characters so that when we input that information into our longer prompts that are ultimately going to be used to create story, that information is there so that that character is identified that way. But I'm really okay with this description of giants as well. Maybe we'll come back. Really, right now, I'm just trying to get everything kind of down so that I can start contemplating some of the things that might need to change. It's important to know as much about the default understanding that the AI has as possible, so that I can start deciding where I want to deviate from that default and then come back and let it know. Alright, so in our fantasy world, the dwarfs are a short, stout, and strong race. They have a natural affinity for mining and crafting, and are known for their skill in metalworking. They have a strong sense of tradition, and are very proud of their heritage. They are also known for being stubborn and persistent with a strong work ethic. Religious beliefs of dwarfs in our fantasy world may center around ancestor worship and the reverence of their patron gods of mining, crafting, and smithing. They may have shrines or temples dedicated to these gods in their underground cities. The societal structure of the dwarves is likely to be organized around clan and guilds. Clans are family groups, while guilds are professional organizations that control and regulate specific crafts such as metalworking or engineering. These clans and guild structures may have a strong influence on politics, trade, and economy in their underground cities. In terms of their history, the dwarves may have always lived in their underground cities, possibly driven deep into the earth by a past conflict or cataclysm. They may have a rich history of mining and crafting and have developed advanced engineering and architectural techniques to create their subterranean settlements. They may also have a history of conflicts with other underground races such as goblins, and possibly have alliances with surface dwelling races such as humans or elves. So this is very standard. Something I want to do here is, because it specifically talked about a couple of gods, I would like to say, what should we name the gods of mining, crafting, and smithing? Gods of mining, crafting, and smithing in our fantasy world could be named as follows. For the god of mining, Golnir, could be an appropriate name meaning golden hammer in an ancient language. For the god of crafting, Freya could work. This name is the Norse goddess of love, fertility, war, and death, but also associated with gold and magic. And for the god of smithing, Vulcan could be fitting. This is a Roman god of fire and metalworking. Keep in mind that these are just suggestions. You can always come up with different names that better fit your fantasy world. So we're probably just going to use these. I need to look up Golnir if it's something from some other popular literary work. Okay, it looks like it's the name of a zone in WoW. So probably we won't use that one. Give me a different name for the god of mining. Another name for the god of mining could be Korin. Okay, a name for Japanese chef's knives. Okay. Another name for the god of mining could be Korin, meaning deep delver in an ancient language. It evokes the idea of the god as someone who delves deep into the earth to extract its treasures. So, yeah, we'll probably keep these three names. And we will turn them into gods in our pantheon for our world. And it should just generate a context between the dwarves and these gods. I doubt I'll have to explicitly say these are the gods worshipped by the dwarves, since it's pretty obvious that these are, smithing, mining, whatever gods. And I imagine that when we feed this context into our character generator and tell it to choose gods that our individual characters worship, I'm sure whenever it builds a dwarf, it'll just give us these. I'm hoping that it will also use these gods for some of the humans and for some of the goblins, since they're also a subterranean race and some humans will likely live among the dwarves. I would like to see that happen, but I'm not sure if I'll have to explicitly make it happen or not. I don't think I will, though. The the AI is pretty good at taking options and really spreading them out and doing some interesting stuff with them, so we should be good there. And then we want to talk about the elves. The elves in our fantasy world. Oops. Alright. In our fantasy world, the elves are a race of tall, slender humanoids with pointed ears and long, elegant fingers. They are known for their grace and agility, as well as their sharp minds and keen senses. They possess a connection with nature and are known for their love of the outdoors. Personality traits of elves in our fantasy world might include being wise and reserved, but also fiercely independent and protective of their homes and loved ones. They are often seen as having a deep understanding of the natural world, and they possess a strong sense of tradition and history. In terms of religious beliefs, the elves in our fantasy world likely worship a pantheon of nature-based deities, possibly with a central goddess or god of the forest. They also have a strong connection to the land and may have rituals or practices that honor and give thanks to the earth. The societal structure of the elves in our fantasy world might be based on clan or tribal structures, with each clan or tribe led by a council of elders. They may also have a strong emphasis on family bonds and loyalty to one's clan or tribe. The history of the elves in our fantasy world could involve a long and rich past, possibly dating back to the earliest days of the world's creation. They may have a deep understanding of ancient magic and have coexisted with other races for centuries, possibly even millennia. They could have had conflicts and alliances with other races, shaping the world as we know it. Okay. So an important thing here to talk about, I think, is going to be their pantheon, but also their societal structure. I really want it to be family based in an almost nobility sense. I want every elven family to have its own super rich history because elves tend to be long lived, and so there's that sense of bringing notoriety to your family, and elves are going to naturally work towards improving the power of their family in an overall larger society. I'd like there to be a lot of, nobility intrigue within the elvish society. I don't know exactly how to phrase that to the AI right now, but I want that to be something important. And then I would also like, what names would you give to the elven gods? Here are some possible names for the elven gods in your Elenari, goddess of the moon and magic. Talinar, god of the forest and protector of wild animals. Elistre, goddess of music, dance, and the hunt. Melora, goddess of the sea and natural healing. Coralon, god of art, crafts, and war. Sehanine, goddess of love, dreams, and illusion. Gueron, god of tracking, wilderness, and rangers. Labalis, god of time and wisdom. Hanali, goddess of beauty, love, and the sun. And Rilliphane, god of nature, the wild, and druids. Note that these are just examples, and they could be different depending on the fantasy world you have in mind and the type of elven culture you want to create. So this is an interesting pantheon. I think we will likely carry over some of this pantheon into the human pantheon as well. I think having the human and elven pantheons crisscross, actually the human, elven, and dwarven pantheons all crisscrossing a little bit, is going to be important because I'd like to see some more interconnectivity between those three races. And then the other three races, the giants are going to be fairly solitary, or not necessarily solitary, but reclusive, with only a few giants existing within the cities of the other races. And then orcs and goblins, being much more tribal races, are likely going to be living in more distant, maybe uncivilized, well, I don't want to say uncivilized, undeveloped areas, and living more nomadic lifestyles. So instead of having, like more nomadic humans where maybe, in a plane or something somewhere you would maybe run into nomadic humans, instead we're going to run into nomadic orcs. And most of the humans are going to be concentrated strictly within the larger cities or towns of their respective kingdoms, um, and not have such a wide deviation. In a lot of fantasy settings, humans sort of run the gambit and exist in all sorts of different ways, and instead I'd like to see our different races exhibit those different traits instead of humans exhibiting all those different traits and then the other races just sort of being um, like window dressing, or being explicitly evil and not really having societies outside of trying to conquer and take over things and just fight and kill. And I want them to have a little more depth than that. All right, so the last one we're going to generate here is we're just going to generate the humans. Something that is, oh, I knew that was going to happen. Too many requests in 1 hour, try again later. So this is going to prevent me from carrying on. We've already kind of talked at length about the things I want to talk at. One of the important things here, though, to note is that because this is a beta version of ChatGPT, and the last time they did an update, it actually deleted all the chats, it is important that you back up your chats, even if it's just copy pasting into a notepad, Word document, whatever. You can just paste these texts right back into the AI and say, this is a conversation we had, let's continue it. And you should be good to go. Shouldn't be too difficult to get the information back. Or you could, just re-enter your specific prompts one after another and should get mostly the same information back again. And so you shouldn't have too much problem, but it is important to try and generate a local backup somehow of what you're doing, so you don't lose that in the event of an update deleting all your stuff. Yeah, but if we're going to be rate limited here, we're not going to be able to really do any more world building. I just want to thank anybody who dropped by. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Have a great day.